Chapter 5. Hunting when the heart is a lonely hunter. Skeleton women, facing the life-death-life nature of love. Wolves are good at relationships. Anyone who has observed wolves sees how deeply they bond. Mates are most often for life, even though they clash, even though there is dissension. Their bonds carry them over and through harsh winters, plentiful springs, long walks, new offspring, old predators, tribal dances, and group sings. The relational needs of humans are no different. While the instinctual lives of wolves include loyalty and lifelong bonds of trust and devotion, humans sometimes have trouble with these matters. If we were to use archetypal terms to describe what determines the strong bonds among wolves, we might surmise that the integrity of their relationship is derived from their submission to the ancient life-death-life nature. The life-death-life nature is a cycle of animation, development, decline, and death that is always followed by reanimation. The cycle affects all physical life and all facets of psychological life. Everything, the sun, novas, and the moon, as well as the affairs of humans and those of the tiniest creatures, like cells and atoms, has this fluttering, then faltering, then fluttering again. Unlike humans, wolves do not deem the ups and downs of life, energy, power, food, opportunity, as startling or punitive. The peaks and valleys just are, and wolves ride them as efficiently, as fluidly as possible. The instinctual nature has the miraculous ability to live through all positive boon, all negative consequence, and still maintain relationship to self, to another. Among wolves, the life-death-life cycle of nature and fate are met with grace and wit, and the endurance to stay tight with one's mate and to live long and as well as can be. But in order for humans to live and give loyalty in this most fit manner, in this way which is most wise, most persevering, and most feeling, one has to go up against the very thing one fears most. There is no way around it, as we shall see. One must sleep with Lady Death. Skeleton Woman is a hunting story about love. In stories from the north, love is not a romantic tryst between two lovers. Stories from the circumpolar regions describe love as a union of two beings whose strength together enables one or both to enter into communication with the soul world, and to participate in fate as a dance with life and death. To understand the story, we have to see that in one of the harshest environments and one of the most stressed hunting cultures in the world, love does not mean a flirtation or a pursuit for simple ego pleasure, but a visible bond composed of the psychic sinew of endurance, a union which prevails through bounty and austerity, through the most complicated and most simple days and nights. The union of two beings is seen as angakok, magic, in itself, as a relationship through which the powers that be become known to both individuals. But there are requirements for this kind of union. In order to create this enduring love, one invites a third partner to the union. The third partner is Skeleton Woman. She is also called Lady Death, and as such, she is the life-death-life nature in one of her many guises. In this form, Lady Death is not a disease, but a deity. In a relationship, she has the role of the oracle who knows when it is time for cycles to begin and end. As such, she is the wildish aspect of relationship, the one of whom men are most terrified, and sometimes women also. For when faith in the transformative has been lost, the natural cycle of increase and attrition are feared as well. To create enduring love, skeleton women must be admitted to the relationship and be embraced by both lovers. Here, in this old Inuit story, are the psychic stages for mastery of that embrace. This story was given to me by Mary Ukalat. Let us peer at the images which rise from the smoke of the story. Skeleton woman. She has done something of which her father disapproved, although no one any longer remembered what it was. But her father had dragged her to the cliffs and thrown her over into the sea. There the fish ate her flesh away and plucked out her eyes. As she lay under the sea, her skeleton turned over and over in the currents. One day a fisherman came fishing. Well, in truth, many came to this babe once. But this fisherman had drifted far from his home place and did not know that the local fishermen stayed away, saying this inlet was haunted. The fisherman's hook drifted down through the water and caught of all places in the bones of skeleton woman's rib cage. The fisherman thought, "Oh, now I've really got a big one. Now I really have one." In his mind, he was thinking of how many people this great fish would feed, how long it would last, how long he might be free from the chore of hunting. And as he struggled with his great weight on the end of the hook, the sea was stirred to a thrashing froth, and his kayak bucked and shook, for she who was beneath struggled to disentangle herself. And the more she struggled, the more she tangled in the line. No matter what she did, she was inexorably dragged upward, tugged by the bones of her own ribs. The hunter had turned to scoop up his net, so he did not see her bald head rise above the waves. He did not see the little coral creatures glinting in the orbs of her skull. He did not see the crustaceans on her old ivory teeth. When he turned back with his net, her entire body, such as it was, had come to the surface and was hanging from the tip of his kayak by her long front teeth. "Ugh!" cried the man, and his heart fell into his knees. His eyes hid in terror on the back of his head, and his ears blazed bright red. "Ugh!" he screamed, and knocked her off the prow with his oar, and began paddling like a demon towards the shoreline. And not realizing she was tangled in his line, he was frightened all the more, for she appeared to stand upon her toes while chasing him all the way to shore. No matter which way he zigged his kayak, she stayed right behind, and her breath rolled over the water in clouds of steam, and her arms flailed out as though to snatch him down into the depths. "Ah!" he wailed as he ran around. In one leap he was out of his kayak, clutching his fishing stick, and running, and the coral white corpse of skeleton woman still snagged in his fishing line, bumpety-bump behind him, right after him. Over the rocks he ran, and she followed. Over the frozen tundra he ran, and she kept right up. Over the meat laid out to dry he ran, crackling it to pieces as he mucklucks bore down. Throughout it all she kept right behind, in fact, grabbed some of the frozen fish as she was dragged behind. This she began to eat, for she had not gorged in a long, long time. Finally the man reached his snow house and dove right into the tunnel, and on hands and knees scrabbled his way into the interior. Panting and sobbing, he lay there in the dark, his heart a drum, a mighty drum. Safe at last, oh, so safe. Yes, safe. Thank the gods, Raven, yes, thank Raven. Yes, and all bountiful Sedna, safe at last. Imagine when he lit his whale oil lamp. There, it lay, in a tumble upon his snow floor. One heel over her shoulder, one knee inside her rib cage, one foot over her elbow. He could not say later what it was. Perhaps the firelight softened her features, or the fact that he was a lonely man. But a feeling of some kindness came into his breathing, and slowly he reached out his grimy hands, and using words softly like mother to child, began to untangle her from the fishing line. Oh, na, na, na. First he untangled the toes, then the ankles. Oh, na, na, na. On and on he worked into the night, until dressing her in furs to keep her warm. Skeleton woman's bones were all in order a human's should be. He felt into his leather cuffs for his flint, and used some of his hair to light a little more fire. He gazed at her from time to time, as he oiled the precious wood of his fishing stick, and rewound the gut line. And she in the furs uttered not a word. She did not dare, lest this hunter take her out and throw her down to the rocks and break her bones to pieces utterly. The man became drowsy, slid under his sleeping skins, and soon was dreaming. And sometimes, as humans sleep, they know, you know, a tear escapes from the dreamer's eye. We never know what sort of dream causes this, but we know it is either a dream of sadness or longing. And this is what happened to the man. The skeleton woman saw the tear glisten in the firelight, and she became suddenly so thirsty. She tinkled and clanked and crawled over to the sleeping man and put her mouth to his tear. The single tear was like a river, and she drank and drank and drank until her many years old long thirst was slaked. While lying beside him, she reached inside the sleeping man and took out his heart, the mighty drum. She sat up and banged on both sides of it. Boom, 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 boom. As she drummed, she began to sing out, flesh, 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 flesh. And the more she sang, the more her body filled out with flesh. She sang for hair and good eyes and nice fat hands. She sang the divide between her legs and breasts, long enough to wrap for warmth and all the things a woman needs. And when she was all done, she also sang the sleeping man's clothes off and crept into his bed with him, skin against skin. She returned the great drum, his heart, to his body, and that is how they awakened, wrapped one around the other, tangled from their night, in another way now, a good and lasting way. The people who cannot remember how she came to her first ill fortune say she and the fishermen went away and were consistently well fed by the creatures she had known in her life underwater. The people say that it is true, and that is all they know. Death in the House of Love. Inability to face and untangle the skeleton woman is what causes many love relationships to fail. To love, one must not only be strong, but wise. Strength comes from the spirit. Wisdom comes from the skeleton woman. As we see in the tale, if one wishes to be fed for life, one must face and develop a relationship with a life-death-life nature. When we have that, we are no longer bumbling along fishing for fantasies, but are made wise about the necessary deaths and startling births that create true relationships. When we face skeleton women, we learn that passion is not something to go get, but rather something generated in cycles and given out. It is skeleton women who demonstrates that a shared living together through all increase and decrease, through all endings and beginnings, is what creates an unparalleled love of devotion. The story is an apt metaphor for the problem of modern love, the fear of the life-death-life nature, the death aspect in particular. In much of Western culture, the original character of the death nature has been covered over by various dogmas and doctrines until it is split off from its other half, life. We have erroneously been trained to accept a broken form of one of the most profound and basic aspects of the wild nature. We have been taught that death is always followed by more death. It is simply not so. Death is always in the process of incubating new life, even when one's existence has been cut down to the bones. Rather than seeing the archetypes of death and life as opposites, they must be held together as the left and right side of a single thought. It is true that within a single love relationship there are many endings, yet somehow and somewhere in the delicate layers of the being that is created when two people love one another, there is both a heart and breath. While one side of the heart empties, the other fills. When one breath runs out, another begins. If one believes that the life-death-life force has no stanza beyond death, it is no wonder some humans are frightened of commitment. They are terrified to go through even one ending. They cannot bear to pass from the veranda into the inner rooms. They are fearful, for they sense that in the breakfast room of the house of love sits Lady Death, tapping her toe, folding and refolding her gloves. Before her is a work list. On one side, what is living, on the other, what is dying. She means to carry through. She means to maintain a balance. The archetype of the life-death-life force is grossly misunderstood throughout many modern cultures. Some no longer understand that Lady Death is loving and that life will be renewed through her ministrations. In many folklores, she receives much sensational press, that she carries a scythe and harvests the unsuspecting, that she kisses her victims and leaves their corpses scattered behind her, or that she drowns them and then wails long into the night. But in other cultures, such as East India and Mayan, which take more care to teach about the wheel of life and death, Lady Death unfolds the already dying, easing their pain, giving them comfort. She is said to turn the baby into the womb to the head-first position so it can be born. She is said to guide the hands of the midwife to open the pathways of the mother's milk in the breasts, as well as to comfort anyone who weeps alone. Rather than vilifying her, those who know her in full cycle respect her largesse and her lessons. Archetypally, the life-death-life nature is a basic component of the instinctive nature. This is personified through world myth and folklore as Dama del Muerte, Lady Death, Coatlicue, Hell, Berkta, Kuan Yin, Baba Yaga, Lady in White, Compassionate Nightshade, and as a group of women called by the Greeks Graia, the Grey Ladies, from the Banshee, in her carriage made of night cloud, to La Llorona, the weeping lady, the weeping woman at the river, from the dark angel who brushes humans with a wingtip, collapsing them in ecstasy, to Swampfire that appears when death is imminent. Stories are filled with these remnants of the old life-death-life goddess personifications. Much of our knowledge of the life-death, life-nature is contaminated by our fear of death. Therefore, our ability to move with the cycles of life-death, life-nature is quite frail. These forces do not do something to us. They are not thieves who rob us from things we cherish. This nature is not a hit-and-run driver who smashes what we value. No. The life-death, life forces are part of our own nature, an inner authority that knows the steps, knows the dance of life and death. It is composed of the parts of ourselves who know when something can, should, and must be born, and when it must die. It is a deep teacher, if we can only learn its tempo. Rosario Castellanos, the Mexican mystic and ecstatic poet, writes about surrender to the forces that govern life and death. Dadme la muerte qui me falta, which in English means, give me the death I need. Poets understand that there is nothing of value without death. Without death, there are no lessons. Without death, there is no dark for the diamond to shine from. While those who are initiated are unafraid of Lady Death, the culture often encourages that we throw skeleton women over the cliffs. For not only is she fearsome, it takes too long to learn her ways. A soulless world encourages faster, quicker thrashing about to find the one filament that seems to be the one that will burn forever and right now. However, the miracle we are seeking takes time to find it, time to bring it to life. The modern search for a perpetual motion machine rivals the search for a perpetual love machine. It is not surprising that people trying to love become confused and harried, and as in Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Red Shoes, dance a mad dance, unable to stop the frantic jig, and will right past the things they, in their deepest hearts, cherish most. Yet, there is another way, a better way, which takes into account human foibles, fears and quirks, and as so often happens in the cycles of individuation, most of us just stumble over it. The first phases of love, the accidental finding of treasure. In all tales, there is material that can be understood as a mirror reflecting the illness or the well-being of one's inner life. Also in tales, there are mythic themes that can be understood as describing stages of and instruction for maintaining balance in both inner and outer worlds. While we could interpret Skeleton Woman's story as representing the movements within a single psyche, I find this tale most valuable when understood as a series of 7 tasks that teach one soul to love another deeply and well. These are discovering another person as a kind of spiritual treasure, even though one may not at first realize what one has found. Next, in most love relationships, comes the chase and the hiding, a time of hopes and fears for both. Then comes the untangling and understanding of the life-death life aspects of the relationship and the compassion for the task. Next come the relaxing into trust, the ability to rest in the presence and goodwill of the other. And after that, a time of sharing both future dreams and past sadness. These being the beginning of healing archaic wounds with regard to love. And finally, the use of the heart to sing up new life and the intermingling of body and soul. The first task, the finding of treasure, is found in dozens of tales throughout the world that describe the catching of a creature from beneath the sea. When this occurs in the narrative, we always know that a big struggle will soon take place between what lives in the topside world and what lives or has been repressed into the underworld. In this tale, the fisherman snags more than he ever expected. "Oh, it's a big one," he thinks as he turns to gain his net. He does not realize that he is bringing up the scariest treasure he will ever know, that he is bringing up more than he can yet handle. He does not know that he will have to come to terms with it, that he is about to have all his powers tested. And worse, he does not know that he does not know. That is the state of all lovers at the beginning. They are blind as bats. Humans who do not know any better have the proclivity to approach love the same way the fisherman in the story approaches the hunt. "Ah, I hope I get a big one that will feed me for a long time to come, one that will excite me, make my life easier, one I can brag about to all the other hunters back home." This is the natural progression of the naive or famished hunter. The very young, the uninitiated, the hungry, and the wounded have values that revolve around the finding and the winning of trophies. The very young truly do not know what they are seeking yet. The hungry seek sustenance, and the wounded seek consolation for previous losses. Yet all will have treasure happen upon them. When one is in the company of the great powers of the psyche, in this case the life woman, and one is naive, then one is sure to get more than what one was fishing for. So often we entertain the fantasy of being fed from the deep nature through a love affair, a job, or by money, and we hope these feedings will last for a long time. We would like not to do any further work. In truth, there are even times when we would like to be fed without doing much work at all. In reality, we know nothing of value. Ever develops this way, but we wish it anyway. To lay inert and only dreaming of perfect love is easy. It is an anesthetization from which we might never recover, but for ruthlessly snagging something valuable, yet outside our awareness. For the naive and wounded, the miracle of the psyche's way is that even if you are half-hearted, irreverent, didn't mean to, didn't really hope so, don't want to, feel unworthy to, aren't ready for it, you will accidentally stumble upon treasure anyway. Then it is your soul's work to not overlook what has been brought up, to recognize treasure as treasure, no matter how unusual its form, and to consider carefully what to do next. The fisherman motive shares some archetypal symbolism with the hunter, and these represent, among many things, the psychological elements of humans that seek to know, that strive to nourish self through merging with the instinctual nature. In stories as in life, the hunter and fisherman begin their quest in one of three ways: in a sacred, mean-spirited, or bumbling manner. In the skeleton woman story, we can see that the fisherman is a little on the bumbling side. He's not mean-spirited, but he does not exactly have a sacred attitude or intention either. Sometimes lovers begin this way too. At the beginning of a relationship, they are only fishing for a little excitement or a little help me make it through the night antidepressant. Without realizing it, they unwittingly enter a part of their own and the other person's psyches in which skeleton woman resides. While their egos may be fishing for fun, this psychical space is sacred ground for skeleton women. If we troll these waters, we are guaranteed to hook her for certain. The fisherman thinks he is pursuing simple nourishment and nurture, when in fact he is bringing up the entire elemental feminine nature, the neglected life-death-life nature. It cannot be overlooked, for wherever new life begins, the Death Queen shows up. And when this occurs, at least for the moment, people pay rapt and fearful attention. In motive, Skeleton Woman is similar to Sedna, another life-death-life figure from Inuit mythology. Sedna is the great deformed creation goddess who lives in the Inuit underworld. Sedna's father threw her over the edge of his kayak, for unlike other dutiful daughters of the tribe, she had run off with a dogman. Like the father in the fairy tale, the handless maiden, Sedna's father chopped off her hands. Her fingers and limbs sank to the bottom of the sea, where they became fish and seals and other life forms that sustained the Inuit ever after. What was left of Sedna also sank to the bottom of the sea. There she became all bones and long, long hair. In the Inuit rite, earthbound shamans swim down to her, bringing peace food to quiet her snarling dog husband and guardian. The shamans comb her long, long hair while singing to her, begging her to heal the soul or body of a person above, for she is the great Angakok magician. She is the great northern gate of life and death. Skeleton Woman, who spent an eon lying under the water, can also be understood as a woman's disused and misused life force. In her vital and resurrected form, she governs the intuitive and emotive ability to complete the life cycles of birthings and endings, grievings and celebrations. She is the one who peers at things. She can tell when it is time for a place, a thing, an act, a group, or a relationship to die. This psychological sensitivity awaits those who would lift her to consciousness through the act of loving another. A part of every woman and every man resists knowing that in all love relationships, death must have her share. We pretend we can love without our illusions about love dying, pretend we can go on without our superficial expectations dying, pretend we can progress and that our favorite flushes and rushes will never die. But in love, psychically, everything becomes picked apart. Everything. The ego does not want it to be so, yet it is how it is meant to be. And the person of a deep and wildish nature is undeniably drawn to the task. What dies? Illusion dies. Expectations die. Greed for having it all, for wanting to have all be beautiful only, all this dies. Because love always causes a descent into death nature. We can see why it takes abundant self-power and soulfulness to make that commitment. When one commits to love, one also commits to the revivification of Skeleton Woman and all her teachings. The fisherman in the story is slow to realize the nature of what he has caught. This is true of everyone at first. It is hard to realize what you are doing when you are fishing in the unconscious. If you are inexperienced, you do not know that down there lives the death nature. Once you find out what you are dealing with, your impulse is to throw her back. We become like the fathers who throw their wild daughters out of the kayak and into the sea. We know that relationships sometimes falter when they move from the anticipatory phase to the stage of facing what is really on the end of one's hook. This is as true to the relationship between a mother and her 18-month-old child as that between parents and their teenager, as between friends, as that between lovers of a lifetime. or of just a little time. The relationship begun in all goodwill flaps and sways, and sometimes staggers when the sweetheart stage is over. Then, instead of enacting a fantasy, the more challenging relationship begins in earnest, and all one's craft and wisdom must be called into action. The skeleton woman who lies under the water is an inert form of deep instinctual life, which knows by heart the creating of life, the creating of death. If lovers insist on a life of forced gaiety, perpetual pleasuramas, and other forms of deadening intensity, if they insist on the sexual donner and blitz, thunder and lightning, or a torrent of delectable and no strife at all, there goes the life, death, life, nature, right over the cliff, drowning in the sea again, refusing to allow all the cycles of life, death, and life in the love relationship causes the skeleton woman nature to be ripped from her psychic lodgings and drowned. Then the love relationship takes on a strained, let us never be sad, let us always have fun, face to be maintained at all costs. The soul of the relationship sinks out of sight, set to drift underwater, senseless and useless. Skeleton woman is always thrown over the cliff when one or both lovers cannot stand her or understand her. She's thrown over the cliff when we misapprehend the use of transformative cycles, when things must die and be replaced by others. If lovers cannot stand these life, death, life processes, they cannot love one another over and beyond hormonal aspirations. Throwing the life, death, life, nature over the cliff always causes the woman lover and the soulful force in men to become a skeleton, bereft of a genuine love of nourishment. As woman is a keeper of cycles, the life, death, life cycles are at the center of her concern. Since there can be little new life without a decline in that which has gone previously, lovers who insist on attempting to keep everything at a psyche scintillating peak will spend their days in an increasingly ossified relationship. The desire to force love to live on in its most positive form only is what causes love ultimately to fall over dead, and for good. The fisherman's challenge is to face Lady Death, her embrace, and her life and death cycles. Unlike other tales in which an underwater creature is captured but then released, thereby granting the fisherman a wish in gratitude, Lady Death is not letting go. Lady Death is not graciously granting any wishes. She surfaces, like it or not, for without Lady Death there can be no real knowledge of life, and without that knowing there can be no fealty, no real love or devotion. Love costs. It costs bravery. It costs going the distance, as we shall see. I see a phenomenon time and again in lovers regardless of gender. It goes something like this. Two people begin a dance to see if they would care to love one another. Suddenly, skeleton woman is accidentally hooked. Something in the relationship begins diminishing and slides into entropy. Often the painful pleasure of sexual excitement is abating, or one sees the other's frail, injured underside, or sees the other as not quite trophy material, and that's when the bald and yellow-toothed old girl rises to the surface. It seems so gruesome, yet this is the premier time when there is a real opportunity to show courage and to know love. To love means to stay with. It means to emerge from a fantasy world into a world where sustainable love is possible. face to face, bones to bones, a love of devotion. To love means to stay when every cell says run. When lovers are able to tolerate the life-death-life nature, when they are able to understand it as a continuum, as a night between 2 days, and as the force that creates a love that endures a lifetime, they are able to face the skeleton woman in the relationship. Then together they are strengthened, and both are called to deeper understanding of the two worlds they live in. One, the mundane world, the other, the one of spirit. During my 20 years of practice, men and women have burrowed into my sofa, saying with happy terror, "I met someone. I didn't mean to. I was just minding my own business. I wasn't looking, and wham! I met this someone with the capital S. Now what am I going to do?" As they continue to nurture the new relationship, they begin to cower. They shrink, they worry. Are they having love anxiety over this person? No, they are feeling fearful because they are beginning to glimpse a bald skull rising from beneath the waves of their passion. What shall they do? I tell them this as a magic time. It does little to calm them. I tell them we shall now see something wonderful. They have little faith. I tell them to hold on. And this they are able to do, but barely. Before I know it, from the viewpoint of the analysis, the little boat of their love relationship is rowing faster and faster. It careens into shore, and before they can say jackrabbit, they are running for their lives. And as analyst, I am running along beside them, trying to put a word in, while guess who bumpety bump along behind. For most, when first confronting skeleton women, the impulse is to run like the wind, and as far away as possible. Even running is part of the process. It is only human to do so, but not for long and not forever. The chase and the hiding. The death nature has an odd habit of surfacing in love affairs just at the time we feel we have won over a lover, just as we feel we have landed a big fish. That's when the life-death-life nature surfaces and scares everyone sideways. This is when more contortions go on about why love cannot, will not, should not work for either party concerned. This is where all the diving into the burrow is done. It is an effort to become invisible. Invisible to the lover. No, invisible to skeleton woman. That is what all the running and hiding is about. But as we see, there is nowhere to hide. Rational psyche goes fishing for something deep, and not only lands it, but is shocked it can barely stand it. Lovers have a sense that something is chasing them. Sometimes they think it is the other who is doing the chasing. In reality, it is skeleton women. At first, when we learn to truly love, we misunderstand many things. We think she is chasing us, when in fact, our intention to relate to another human being in a special way is what hooks skeleton women, so she cannot escape from us. Wherever love is nascent, the life-death-life force will always surface. Always. So here are the fisherman and the skeleton woman, all tangled up with each other. A skeleton woman bumps along behind the terrified fisherman. She begins a primitive participation in life. She becomes hungry and eats dried fish. Later, as she comes even more to life, she will quench her thirst with a fisherman's tear. We see this odd phenomenon in all love affairs. The faster he runs, the more she picks up speed. When one of the other lovers attempts to run from the relationship is paradoxically invested with more life. And the more life that is created, the more frightened the fisherman becomes, and the more he runs, the more life is created. This phenomenon is one of life's central tragic comedies. One person is in such a situation, dreamed of meeting a woman or a lover whose soft body opened like a cabinet. Inside her body cavity were embryos shining and throbbing, daggers on shelves dripping with blood, and bags packed with the first green color of spring. The dreamer was given great pause, for this was a dream about life, death, life, nature. These glimpses into the interiority of skeleton women caused the lovers in training to seize their fishing sticks and hie across the land at breakneck speed, in an effort to put as much distance as possible between themselves and her. Skeleton woman is great and mysterious. She's dazzlingly numinous. Psychically, she stretches from horizon to horizon and from heaven to hell. She is much to embrace. Yet it is no wonder people run to embrace her. What one fears can strengthen, can heal. The running and hiding phase is the time during which lovers try to rationalize the fears of the life-death-life cycle of love. They say, I can do better with someone else, or I don't want to give up my fill in the blank, or I don't want to change my life, or I don't want to face my wounds or anyone else's, or I'm not ready yet, or I don't want to be transformed without first knowing in absolute detail what I will look like or feel like afterward. It is a time when thoughts are all jumbled together, when one makes a desperate dive for shelter, and the heart beats, not from cherishing and being cherished as much as from abject terror. To be trapped by Lady Death, aye, the horror of meeting the life-death-life force face to face, double aye. Some make the mistake of thinking they are running away from relationship with the lover. They are not. They are not running away from love or the pressures of the relationship. They are trying to outrun the mysterious life-death-life force. Psychology diagnoses this as fear of intimacy, fear of commitment, but those are only symptoms. The deeper issue is one of misbelief and distrust. Those who run away forever fear to truly live according to the cycles of wild nature. So here the death woman chases the man across water, across the boundary of the unconscious to the conscious landmass of the mind. The conscious psyche becomes aware of what it has caught and tries desperately to outrun it. We do this constantly in our life. Something fearsome raises its head. We aren't paying attention and keep pulling it up, thinking it is some booty, it is trove, but not the kind we've imagined. It is a treasure we've unfortunately been taught to fear. So we attempt to run away or throw it back, or prettifying it and making it what it is not. But this will not work. Eventually, we all have to kiss the hag. The same process follows in love. We want only beauty, but wind up facing the baddie instead. We push skeleton women away, but she proceeds. We run, she follows. She is the great teacher we have been saying we want. No, not this teacher, we shriek. We want a different one. Too bad. This is the teacher everyone gets. There is a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. This means the teacher comes when the soul, not the ego, is ready. The teacher comes when the soul calls, and thank goodness for the ego is never fully ready. If it were solely up to the ego's readiness to draw the teacher to us, we would remain essentially teacherless for life. We are blessed since the soul continues transmitting its desire, regardless of the ever-changing opinions of our egos. People fear that when things become tangled and frightening in love relationships, that the end is near, but this is not so. Because this is an archetypal matter, and because skeleton woman does the work of fate, the hero is supposed to take off across the horizon. The death woman is supposed to come right along behind. The lover in training is supposed to dive into his little hut and gasp and choke and hope he is safe. And skeleton woman is supposed to follow him right into his safe haven. He's supposed to untangle her, and so forth. For modern lovers, the idea of taking space is like the fisherman's little snow house, where he thinks he is safe. Sometimes this fear of confronting the death nature is distorted into begging off, trying to keep only the pleasurable sides of the relationship going, without dealing with skeleton women. That will never work. It causes lovers who are not taking space immense anxiety, for they themselves are willing to meet skeleton women. They have primed themselves. They have reinforced themselves. They are attempting to keep their fears balanced. And now, just as they are ready to untangle this mystery, just as one or the other is about to drum on the heart and sing up a life together, one lover cries, "Not yet, not yet," or "No, not ever." There is a vast difference between the need for solitude and renewal and the desire to take space, to avoid the inevitable intercourse with skeleton women. But intercourse, meaning exchange with and acceptance of the life-death life cycle, is the next step in order to strengthen one's ability to love. Those who enter into relationship with her will gain an enduring skill for love. Those who won't. There is no way around it. All the not readiness, all the "I need time" are understandable, but only for a short while. The truth is that there is never a completely ready, there is never really a right time. As with any descent to the unconscious, there comes a time when one simply hopes for the best, pinches one's nose, and jumps into the abyss. If this were not so, we would not have needed to create the words heroine, hero, or courage. The work of learning the life nature has to be done. Put off, skeleton woman sinks beneath the water, but will rise again and again and give chase again and again. It is her work to do this. It is our work to learn. If one wishes to love, there is no getting around it. The work of embracing her is a task. Without a task that challenges, there can be no transformation. Without a task, there is no real sense of satisfaction. To love pleasure takes little. To love truly takes a hero who can manage his own fear. Granted, many people come to this escape and hide stage. Some unfortunately arrive here over and over. The entrance to this burrow is rutted with all the scrambling, but those who care to love emulate the fisherman. They strive to light the fire and face the life nature. They contemplate what they fear and paradoxically respond with both conviction and wonder. Untangling the skeleton. The skeleton woman tale is one of many universal suitor test stories. In a suitor test, lovers must prove their right intention and power, usually demonstrating that they have the cojones or ovarios to face a powerful and fearsome numinosity of some sort. Though here we call it the life nature. Others might call it an aspect of the self or the spirit of love. Yet others might say God or gracia, a spirit of energy, or any number of appellations. The fisherman shows his right intent, his power, and his increasing involvement with skeleton women by untangling her. He looks at her all bent this way and that, and he sees in her a glimmer of something, he knows not what. He had run from her, panting and sobbing. Now he thinks to touch her. She is touching his heart in some way, just by being. When we comprehend the loneliness of the life-death-life nature, who, through no fault of her own, is constantly thrown away, then perhaps we too can be touched by her travail. If it is love we are making, even though we are apprehensive or frightened, we are willing to untangle the bones of the death nature. We are willing to see how it all goes together. We are willing to touch the not beautiful in another and in ourselves. Behind this challenge is a cunning test from the self. It is found even more clearly in the tales where the beautiful appears ugly in order to test someone's character. In the tale Diamonds, Rubies and Pearls, a good but reviled stepdaughter draws water from a wealthy stranger and is rewarded by having diamonds, rubies and pearls spill from her mouth when she speaks. The stepmother orders her own lazy daughters to stand at the same well and wait upon the wealthy stranger. But this time an other stranger in rags comes. When she begs for a dipper of water, the evil daughters haughtily refuse. The stranger rewards them by causing snakes, toads, and lizards to fall from their mouths ever after. In fairy tale, justice, as in the deep psychic kindness to that which seems less, is rewarded by good, and refusal to do good for one who is not beautiful is reviled and punished. It is the same in the great feeling states such as love. When we enlarge ourselves to touch the not beautiful, we are rewarded. If we spurn the not beautiful, we are severed from life and left out in the cold. For some, it is easier to think higher, more beautiful thoughts and to touch those things that positively transcend us than to touch, help, and assist the not so positive. Even more so, as the story illustrates, it is easy to turn away the not beautiful and feel falsely righteous about it. This is the love problem of dealing with skeleton women. What is the not beautiful? Our own secret hunger to be loved is the not beautiful. Our disuse and misuse of love is the not beautiful. Our dereliction in loyalty and devotion is unlovely. Our sense of soul separateness is homely. Our psychological warts, inadequacies, misunderstandings, and infantile fantasies are the not beautiful. Additionally, the life-death-life nature which births, destroys, incubates, and births again is considered by our culture the not beautiful. To untangle skeleton women is to understand that conceptual error and to set it aright. To untangle skeleton women is to understand that love does not mean all glimmering candles and increase. To untangle skeleton women means that one finds heartening rather than fear in the darkness of regeneration. It means balm for old wounds. It means changing our ways of seeing and being to reflect the health rather than dearth of soul. To love, we touch the basic and not so lovely bony women. To love, we touch the basic and not so lovely bony woman, untangling the sense of life, death, life, nature for ourselves, bringing her back to order, letting her live again. It is not enough to hold the unconscious to the surface, not even enough to accidentally drag her home. It stops the progression of love to be afeared or disdainful of her for very long. Untangling skeleton women begins to break the spell. That is, the fear that one will be consumed, made dead forever. Archetypally, to untangle something is to make a descent, to follow a labyrinth, to descend into the underworld or the place where things are revealed in an entirely new way, to be able to follow a convoluted process. In fairy tales, to loosen the girdle Undo the knot. Untie and untangle means to begin to understand something, to understand its applications and uses, to become a mage, a knowing soul. When the fisherman untangles skeleton women, he begins to have hands-on knowledge of life's and death's articulations. The skeleton is an excellent image of the life-death-life nature. As a psychic image, the skeleton is composed of hundreds of small and large odd-shaped sticks and knobs in continuous harmonious relationship to one another. When one bone turns, the rest turn, even if imperceptibly. The life-death-life cycles are like that exactly. When life moves, the bones of death move sympathetically. When death moves, the bones of life begin to turn too. Also, when one tiny bone is out of place, chipped, spurred, subluxed, it hurts the integrity of the whole. When the life-death-life nature in oneself or in a relationship is suppressed, the same occurs. One's life limps along, catches, hobbles, protects movement. When there is hurt to these structures and cycles, there is always interruption of libido. Love is not possible then. We lie under the water, just bones, drifting back and forth. To untangle the life-death-life nature means to learn her attenuations, habits, movements. It means to learn the cycles of life and death, to memorize them, and so to see how they all go together. How they are all a single organism, just as the skeleton is a single organism. Fear is a poor excuse for not doing the work. We are all afraid. It is nothing new. If you are alive, you are fearful. Among the Inuit raven is the trickster. In his undeveloped side, he is a creature of appetite. He likes pleasures only, attempts to avoid all the uncertainty and the fears that uncertainty brings. He is a good deal cautious and a good deal greedy both. He is fearful if something does not immediately look fulfilling. He pounces when it does. He likes bright abalone shell, silver beads, endless victuals, gossip, and warm sleeps over the smoke hole. The raven ego is the lover-to-be who wants a sure thing. The raven ego is afraid passion will end. He is afraid and tries to avoid the end of the meal, the end of the fire, the end of the day, and an end to pleasure. He becomes willy and always to his detriment, for when he forgets his soul, he loses his power. Raven ego is afraid that if we admit the life-death-life nature into our lives, we will never be happy again. Have we been so very perfectly happy all along? No. But the raven ego is very simple, like an unsocialized child, and not particularly a happy-go-lucky child either. He is more like a child who is watching all the time to see which slice is the biggest, which bed is the softest, which lover the most handsome. 3 things differentiate living from the soul versus living from the ego only. They are the ability to sense and learn new ways, the tenacity to ride a rough road, and the patience to learn deep love over time. Raven ego, however, has a penchant and a proclivity to avoid learning. Patience is not ego's strong suit. Enduring in relationship is not Raven's forte. So it is not from the ever-changing ego that we love another, but rather from the wild soul. A wild patience, as poet Adrian Rich puts it, is required in order to untangle the bones, to learn the meaning of Lady Death, to have the tenacity to stay with her. It would be a mistake to think that it takes a muscle-bound hero to accomplish this. It does not. It takes a heart that is willing to die and be born and die and be born again and again. The untangling of skeleton women reveals that she is ancient and old beyond discriminate time. It is she who measures energy versus distance, she who weighs time versus libido, she who hefts spirit versus survival. She meditates on it, she studies it, she considers, and then she moves in to invest it with a spark or two, or a sudden blaze of wildfire, or to tamp it down a bit, bank it down, or put out its life altogether. She knows what is required. She knows when it is time. In untangling her, we acquire the ability to sense what comes next, to better comprehend how all the aspects of nature's psyche interrelate, how we can participate. To untangle her means to gain articulate knowledge of self and others. It means to strengthen our ability to follow the phases, projects, eras of incubation, birthing, and transformation peaceably and with as much grace as we can marshal. So in this sense, a lover who once was rather artless about love becomes far better as it through having observed the skeleton woman and from having sorted her bones. As one begins to ascertain the patterns of life, death, life, one can anticipate the cycles of the relationship in terms of increase following deficit and attrition following abundance. A person who has untangled skeleton women knows patience, knows better how to wait. He is not shocked or afraid of spareness. He is not overwhelmed by fruition. He needs to attain, to have right now, are transformed into finer crafts of finding all assets of relationships, observing how cycles of relationships work together. He is not afraid to relate to the beauty of fierceness, the beauty of the unknown, the beauty of the not beautiful. And in learning and working at all these, he becomes the quintessential wild lover. How does a man learn these things? How does anyone learn them? Enter into direct dialogue with the life, death, life nature by listening to the inner voice that is not ego. Learn by asking the life, death, life nature direct questions about love and loving, and then listen to her answers. Through all, we learn to not be misled by the nagging voice at the back of the mind that says, "This is silly. I'm just making this all up." We learn to ignore that voice and listen to what is heard beyond that. We learn to follow what we hear, all those things that bring us closer to acute awareness, the love of devotion and clear view of the soul. It is good to make a meditative and daily practice of untangling the life, death, life nature over and over again. The fisherman sings a little one-line song over and over to aid the untangling. It is a song to help awareness, to help untangle the skeleton woman nature. We do not know what he is singing. We can only guess. When we are untangling this nature, it would be good for us to sing something like this. What must I give more death today in order to generate more life? What do I know should die, but am hesitant to allow to do so? What must die in order for me to love? What not beauty do I fear? Of what use is the power of the not beautiful to me today? What should die today? What should live? What life am I afraid to give birth to? If not now, when? If we sing the song of consciousness till we feel the burn of truth, we throw a burst of fire into the darkness of psyche, so we can see what we're doing, what we're truly doing, not what we wish to think we're doing. This is the untangling of one's feelings and the beginning of understanding why love and life are to be lived by the bones. To face skeleton women, one need to take on the role of the solar hero. Nor do armed battle, nor risk one's life in the wilderness. One need only care to untangle her. This power is knowing the life nature awaits lovers who go beyond running away, who push beyond a desire to find themselves safe. The ancients who sought this life and death knowledge called it the pearl of great price, the inimitable treasure. Holding the threads of these mysteries and untangling them brings a powerful knowing about fate and time. Time for all things in their own time. Rolling with the rough, gliding on the smooth. There is no knowledge more preserving, more nutritive, more strengthening of love than this. That is what awaits the lover who will sit by the fire with skeleton women, who will contemplate her and allow the feeling for her to rise. It waits for those who will touch her not beauty and who will untangle her life nature with tenderness. The sleep of trust. In this stage of relationship, a lover returns to a state of innocence, a state in which he is still awed by the emotional elements, a state in which he is full of wishes, hopes, and dreams. Innocence is different than naivety. There is an old saying in the backwoods, ignorance is not knowing anything and being attracted to the good. Innocence is knowing everything and still being attracted to the good. Let us see how far we have come now. A fisherman hunter has brought the life nature to the surface. He has outside his will been pursued by her, but he has also managed to face her. He has felt compassion for her tangled state, and he has touched her. All these are leading him into a full participation with her. All these are leading him into transformation into love. While the metaphor of sleep can denote unconsciousness, here it symbolizes creation and renewal. Sleep is the symbol of rebirth. In creation, myths, souls go to sleep while a transformation of some duration takes place. For in sleep, we are recreated, renewed. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. Sleep is sore, labor's bath, the balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. This is from Shakespeare, Macbeth. If you could lay your eyes upon the most fire-hardened, most cruel and unpitying person alive, during sleep and at the moment of waking, you would see in them for a moment the untainted child spirit, the pure innocence. In sleep we are once again brought back to a state of sweetness. In sleep we are remade. We are reassembled from the inside out, fresh and new as innocence. This state of wise innocence is entered by shedding cynicism and protectionism, and by re-entering the state of wonder one sees in most humans who are very young and many who are very old. It is a practice of looking through the eyes of a knowing and loving spirit, instead of throwing those of the whipped dog, the hounded creature, the mouth atop a stomach, the angry wounded human. Innocence is a state that is renewed as one sleeps. Unfortunately, many throw it aside with a coverlet as they arise each morning. It would be better to take an alert innocence with us and draw it close for warmth. Though the initial return to this state may require scraping away years of jaded viewpoints, decades of callous and carefully constructed bulwarking. Once one has returned, one never has to pry for it, dig for it ever again. To return to an alert innocence is not so much an effort, like moving a pile of bricks from here to there, as it is standing still long enough to let the Spirit find you. It is said that all that you are seeking is also seeking you, that if you lie still, sit still, it will find you. It has been waiting for you a long time. Once it is here, don't move away. Rest. See what happens next. This is the way to approach the death nature. Not as wily and shrewd, but with the trust of spirit. The word innocent is often used to mean a person of no knowing or a simpleton. But the roots of the word mean to be free of injury or hurt. In Spanish, the word inocente is understood to mean a person who tries not to harm another, but who also is able to heal any injury of harm to herself. La Inocenta is the name often given to a curandera healer, one who heals others of injury or harm. To be an innocent means to be able to see clearly what is the matter and to mend it. These are the powerful ideas behind innocence. It is considered not only an attitude about avoiding harm to others or self, but also an ability to mend and restore oneself and others. Think of it. What a boon to all the cycles of loving. By way of this metaphor of innocent sleep, the fisherman trusts the life-death life nature enough to rest and to revivify in her presence. He is entering into a transition that will take him to deeper understanding, a higher stage of maturity. When lovers enter this state, they are surrendering to the forces within themselves, those that have trust, faith, and the profound power of innocence. In the spiritual sleep, the lovers trust that the work of his soul will be worked in him, that all will be as it should be. This lover sleeps the sleep of wise instead of the weary. There is a wariness that is real when danger is near, the wariness that is unwarranted and that comes from having been wounded previously. The latter causes men to act touchy and disinterested, even when they feel they would like to display warmth and caring. Persons who are afraid of being taken for a ride, or of being trapped, or who vociferously state their claim over and over again of wanting to be free, are those who let the gold slip right through their fingers. Many times I've heard a man say he has a good woman who is enamored of him and he of her, but he just can't let go enough to see what he really feels about her. The turning point for such a person is when he allows himself to love even though he has pangs, even though he is nervous, even though he has been wounded previously, even though he fears the unknown. Sometimes there are no words to help one's courage. Sometimes you just have to jump. There has to be at some point in a man's life a time when he will trust where love takes him, where he fears more being trapped in some dry, cracked riverbed of a psyche than being out in lush but uncharted territory. When a life is too controlled, there becomes less and less life to control. In this stage of innocence, the fisherman returns to being a young soul, for in his sleep he is unscarred, and there is no memory of what he was yesterday or before. In sleep he is not striving to gain place or position. In his sleep he is renewed. Within the masculine psyche, there is a creature, an unwounded man who believes in the good, who has no doubts about life, who is not only wise, but who also is not afraid to die. Some would identify this as a warrior self, but it is not that. It is a spirit self, a young spirit at that, one who, regardless of being tormented, wounded, and exiled, continues to love, because it is in its own way self-healing and self-mending. Women will testify to seeing this creature lurking in a man outside of his awareness. This young spirit's ability to bring the power of healing to bear on his own psyche is so awesome that it is astounding. His trust is not dependent on his lover not to hurt him. His is a trust that any wound that comes to him can be healed, a trust that a new life follows old, a trust that there is deeper meaning in all these things, that seemingly petty events are not without meaning, that all things of life, of one's life, the ragged, the jagged, and the lilting, and the soaring, all can be used as life's energy. It must be said, too, that sometimes as a man becomes more free and closer to the skeleton woman, his lover becomes more fearful and has some work of her own to do regarding untangling, observing the sleep that returns innocence, learning to trust the life-death-life nature. When both are well initiated, they together then have the power with which to balm any hurt, outlive any pain. Sometimes a person is afraid to go to sleep in the other's presence, afraid to return to a psychic innocence, or afraid the other person will take advantage of him. Such people project all manner of motives onto the other, and simply do not trust themselves. Yet it is not their lovers they mistrust. It is the life-death-life nature they have not yet reckoned with. It is the death nature that they need to trust. As in sleep, the life-death-life nature, in its most wildish form, is as simple as a graceful exhalation, ending an inhalation which is a beginning. The only trust required is to know that when there is one ending, there will be another beginning. In order to do this, if we are lucky, we are worn down and slip into trust by giving in to its pull. The steeper way is by forcibly throwing ourselves into a trusting state of mind, forcing ourselves to remove all the conditions, all the ifs and onlys. However, there is usually no sense waiting until we feel strong enough to trust, because that day will never come. So yes, we take the chance that what we have been taught to believe about the life-death-life nature is wrong, and that our instincts are right. For love to thrive, the mate must trust that whatever will be transformative. He must let himself enter that state of sleep that returns one to a wise innocence, one that creates and recreates as it should, those deeper coils of life-death-life experience. Giving the tear. As the fisherman sleeps, a tear is released from the corner of his eye. Skeleton woman spies it, is filled with thirst, and awkwardly crawls to him to drink from the cup of his eye. What, we ask, could he be dreaming that would cause such a tear to come forth? Tears carry creative power. In mythos, the giving of tears causes immense creation and heartfelt reunion. In herbal folklore, tears are used as a binder to secure elements, unite ideas, join souls. In fairy tales, when tears are thrown, they frighten away robbers or cause rivers to flood. When sprinkled, they call the spirits. When poured onto the body, they heal lacerations and restore sight. When touched, they cause conception. When one has ventured this far into relationship with a life-death-life nature, the tear that is cried is the tear of passion and compassion mixed together, for oneself and for the other. It is the hardest tear to cry, and especially for men and certain kinds of street-tough women. This tear of passion and compassion is most often wept after the accidental finding of treasure, after the fearful chase, after the untangling For it is the combination of these that causes the exhaustion, the disassembling of defenses, the facing of oneself, the stripping down to the bones, the desire for both knowledge and relief. These cause a soul to peer into what the soul truly wants, and to weep for loss and love of both. As surely as skeleton woman has brought to the surface now this tear, this feeling in the man is also brought to the surface. It is an instruction to loving both self and another. Stripped now of all the bristles and hooks and shifts of the daytime world, the man draws skeleton women to lie beside him, to drink and be nourished by his deepest feelings. In his new form, he is able to feed the thirsty other. Her ghost has been summoned by his weeping. Ideas and powers from far off in the psychic world unite over the warmth of his tear. The history of the symbol of water as creator, as pathway, is long and varied. Spring comes in a rain of tears. Entry to the lower world is upon a waterfall of tears. A tear heard by anyone of heart is understood as a cry to come closer. And so does the fisherman cry, and closer she does come. Without his tear she would remain only bones. Without his tear he would never awaken to love. The tear of the dreamer comes when a lover-to-be allows himself to feel and to bind up his own wounds, when he allows himself to see the self-destruction he has wrought by his loss of faith in the goodness of self, when he feels cut away from the nurturing and revivifying cycle of the life-death-life nature. Then he weeps, for he feels his loneliness, his acute homesickness for that psychic place, for that wild knowing. This is the man, healing the man growing in understanding. He takes on his own medicine making. He takes on the task of feeding the deleted or other. Through his tears he begins to create. To love another is not enough, to be not an impediment. In the life of the other is not enough. It is not enough to be supportive and there for them and all the rest. The goal is to be knowledgeable about the ways of life and death in one's own life and panorama. And the only way to be a knowing man is to go to school in the bones of skeleton women. She is waiting for the signal of deep feeling, that one tear that says, I admit the wound. This admission feeds the life-death-life nature, causes the bond to be made, and the deep knowing in a man to begin. We all have made the mistake of thinking someone else can be our healer, our thriller, our filling. It takes a long time to find it is not, mostly because we put the wound outside ourselves instead of ministering to it within. There's probably nothing a woman wants more from a man than for him to dissolve his projections and face his own wound. When a man faces his wound, the tear comes naturally, and his loyalties within and without are made clearer and stronger. He becomes his own healer. He is no longer lonely for the deeper self. He no longer applies to the woman to be his analgesic. There is a story that describes this well. In Greek myth, there was a man named Philoctetes. It is told he inherited the magic bow and arrow of Heracles. Philoctetes was wounded in the foot during battle. However, this wound would not heal, and instead grew so malodorous, and his cries of pain so horrible, that his companions abandoned him on the island Lemnos and left him there to die. Philoctetes barely escaped starvation by using Heracles' bow to shoot some small game. But his wound festered and the smell grew ever greater, so that any sailor even remotely near the island had to steer clear. However, a group of men conspire to brave the stench of Philoctetes' wound in order to steal the magical bow and arrow from him. The men drew lots, and the task fell to the youngest. The older men encouraged him to be quick and travel under cover of night. And so the young man set sail. But on the wind, and overwhelming the smell of the sea, came another odor so horrible that the man had to wrap his face in a cloth wrung in sea water in order to breathe freely. Nothing, however, could protect his ears from Philoctetes' terrible cries. The moon was shrouded in cloud. Good, he thought, as he moored his boat and crept to the side of the agonized Philoctetes. As he reached for the precious bow and arrow, the moon suddenly shed her light upon the haggard face of the dying old man. And something in the young man, he knew not what, suddenly moved him to tears. The young man was overwhelmed with compassion and mercy that endured. Instead of stealing the old man's bow and arrow, the young man purified Philoctetes' wound, bound it, and stayed with him, feeding him, cleaning him, building fires, and caring for the old man till he could carry him to Troy, where he could be healed by a semi-divine physician, Aesculapius. The tear of compassion is wept in response to realizing the stinking wound. The stinking wound has different configurations and sources for each person. For some, it means spending a lifetime pulling oneself up the mountain hand over hand, belatedly, to find we've been working our way up the wrong mountain. For some, it is unresolved and unmedicated issues of abuse in childhood. For others, it is a crushing loss of some sort in life or in love. One young man suffered the loss of his first love and had no support from anyone and no understanding about how to heal from it. For years he had wandered broken and protesting that he was not injured. One man was a rookie player for a pro ball team. He accidentally but permanently injured his leg so that his lifelong dream disappeared overnight. The stinking wound was not only the tragedy, not only the injury, but for 20 years' time, the only medicine he poured into the wound was bitterness, substance abuse, and carousing. When men have wounds like these, they can smell them coming. You can smell them coming. No woman, no love, no attention heals such a wound. Only self-compassion for one's own wounded state. When the man cries a tear, he has come upon his pain, and he knows it when he touches it. He sees how his life has been lived protectively because of the wound. He sees what of life he has missed because of it. He sees how he's hamstrings his life for himself and for others. In fairy tales, tears change people, remind them of what is important, and save their very souls. Only a hardness of heart inhibits weeping and union. There is a saying, a prayer really among the Sufis, asking God to break one's heart. Shatter my heart so a new room can be created for limitless love. The internal feeling of tenderness that moves the fisherman to untangle skeleton women also allows him to feel other forgotten longings, to resurrect his self-compassion, because he is in a state of innocence, that is, thinking all things are possible. He is unafraid to say his soul desires. He is unafraid to wish, for he believes his need will be met. It is a great relief for him to believe his soul will be fulfilled. When the fisherman cries his true feelings, the reunion with the life-death-life nature is furthered. The fisherman's tear draws skeleton woman to him, causes her to thirst, causes her to desire further participation with him. As in fairy tales, tears call things to us. They correct things, provide the missing part of peace. In the African tale Golden Falls, a magician shelters a runaway slave girl by crying so many tears he created a waterfall under which she takes refuge. In the African tale Bone Rattle, souls of dead healers are summoned by the sprinkling of children's tears upon the earth. We are reminded again and again of the power of this great feeling. There is drawing power in tears, and within the tear itself, powerful images that guide us. Tears not only represent feeling, but are also lenses through which we gain an alternative vision. In the story, the fisherman is letting his heart not break down, but break open. It is not the love of the tita, breast milk mother he wants, nor the love of Lucifer, not the love of power or fame or sexuality. It is a love that comes upon him, a love he has always carried within him, but has never acknowledged before. A man's soul is seated more deeply and more clearly as he apprehends this relationship. The tear comes. She drinks. Now something else will develop. And the reborn within him, something he can give to her, a vast and oceanic love, heart. The later phases of love. Heart as drum and singing up. It is taught that the skin or body of a drum determines who and what will be called into being. Some drums are believed to be journeying drums, transporting the drummer and listeners, also called passengers in storytelling tradition, to various and sundry places. Other kinds of drums are powerful in other ways. Drums made of human bone, called the dead. Drums made of the hide of certain animals are good for calling the animal spirits. Drums that are particularly beautiful, called beauty. Drums with bells attached, called child spirits and weather. Drums that are low in voice, called the spirits who can hear that tone. Drums high in voice, called spirits who can hear that tone, and so on. A drum made of hearts will call the spirits that are concerned with the human heart. The heart symbolizes essence. The heart is one of the few essential organs humans and animals must have to live. Remove one kidney, the human lives. Additionally, take both legs, the gallbladder, one lung, one arm, and a spleen, the human lives. Not well, perhaps, but there is life. Take away certain brain functions and the human still lives. Take the heart, the person is gone instantly. The psychological and physiological center is the heart. In Hindu tantras, which are instructions from the gods to humans, the heart is the Anahata chakra, the nerve center that encompasses feeling for another human, feeling for oneself, feeling for the earth, and feeling for God. It is the heart that enables us to love as a child loves, fully, without reservation, and with no hole of sarcasm, depreciation, or protectionism. When Skeleton Woman uses the fisherman's heart, she uses the central motor of the entire psyche, the only thing that really matters, the only thing capable of creating pure and innocent feeling. They say it is the mind that thinks and creates. This story says otherwise, that it is the heart that thinks and calls the molecules, atoms, feelings, yearnings, and whatever else need be into one place to create the matter that fulfills Skeleton Woman's creation. The story contains this promise: allow Skeleton Woman to become more palpable in your life, and she will make your life larger in return. When you free her from her tangled and misunderstood state and realize her as both teacher and lover, she becomes ally and partner. Giving one's heart for new creation, for new life, for the forces of life, death, life, is a descent into the feeling realm. It may be difficult for us, especially if we have been wounded by disappointment or by sorrow, but it is meant to be drummed through to bring to full life the skeleton woman, to come close to the one who has always been close to us. When a man gives his whole heart, he becomes an amazing force. He becomes an inspiratrix, a role that in the past was reserved for women only. When skeleton woman sleeps with him, he becomes fertile. He is invested with feminine powers in a masculine milieu. He carries the seeds of new life and of necessary deaths. He inspires new works within himself, but also in those near him. Over the years, I have seen this in others and experienced it in myself. It is a profound occasion when you create something of value through your lover's beliefs in you, through his heartfelt feeling about your work, your project, your subject. It is an amazing phenomenon. And it is not necessarily limited to a lover. It can occur through anyone who gives his or her heart to you in a deep manner. So the man's bond with the life-death-life nature will eventually give him ideas by the dozens, and life plots and situations and musical scores and colors and images within parallel for the life-death-life nature. The wild woman archetype has at her disposal all that ever was and all that ever will be. When she creates, sings flesh onto herself, the person whose heart she uses feels it, is filled with creation himself, bursts with it, brims over from it. The story illustrates also a double power that comes from the psyche through the symbols of drumming and singing. In mythos, songs heal wounds and are used to bring game closer. Persons are summoned by the singing of their names. Pain is relieved. Magic breaths restores the body. The dead are called or resurrected through song. It is told that all creation was accompanied by a sound or word said aloud, a sound or word whispered or spoken on the breath. The speaker of such sound words may or may not have known or comprehended their meaning. Singing is considered to issue from mysterious source, one that envisaged the whole of creation, all the animals and the humans and the trees and the plants, and all who hear it. In storytelling, it is said that anything that has sap has singing. The creation hymn produces psychic change. The tradition of such is vast. There are love-producing songs in Iceland, and among the Wichita and the Mi'kmaq. In Ireland, magic power is called down by magic song. In one Icelandic story, a person falls on the ice crags and severs a limb, but it is regenerated through the singing of song. In almost all cultures, at the creation, the gods give the people songs, telling them that to use them will call the gods back at any time, that songs will bring to them the things they need as well as transform or banish those things they do not want. In this manner, the giving of songs is a compassionate act that enables humans to call the gods and the great forces into human circles. Song is a special kind of language that accomplishes this in a way the spoken voice cannot. The song, like the drum, creates a non-ordinary consciousness, a trance state, a prayer state. All humans and many animals are susceptible to having their consciousness altered by sound. Certain sounds, like a dripping faucet or a car horn, can make us anxious, even angry. Other sounds, like the ocean's roar or the wind in the trees, fill us with a good feeling. The sound of thudding, as in footsteps, causes a snake to feel a negative tension, but being softly sung to can cause a snake to dance. The word pneuma, breath, shares its origin from the word psyche. They are both considered words for song. So when there is a song in a tale or mythos, we know that the gods are being called upon to breathe their wisdom and power into the matter at hand. We know then that the forces are at work in the spirit world, busy crafting soul. So the singing of song and using heart as drum are both mystical acts awakening layers of the psyche, not much used or seen. The breath of pneuma flowing over us shakes open certain apertures, rouses certain otherwise inaccessible faculties. We cannot say for each person what will be sung up, drummed up, because these open such odd and unusual apertures in the human who participates thusly. However, one can be assured that whatever is enacted will be numinous and arresting. The dance of body and soul. Through their bodies, women live very close to the life-death life nature. When women are in their right instinctual minds, their ideas and impulses to love, to create, to believe, to desire are born, have their time, fade and die, and are reborn again. One might say that women consciously or unconsciously practice this knowledge every moon cycle of their lives. For some, this moon that tells the cycles is up in the sky. For others, it is a skeleton woman who lives in their own psyches. From her very flesh and blood, and from the constant cycles of filling and emptying the red vase in her belly, a woman understands physically, emotionally, and spiritually that zeniths fade and expire, and what is left is reborn in unexpected ways and by inspired means, only to fall back to nothing and yet be reconceived again in full glory. As you can see, the cycles of skeleton women run through, out, and under and in the entire woman. It cannot be otherwise. Sometimes men who are still running away from the life-death, life nature, are afraid of such a woman, for they sense she is a natural ally of skeleton women. But it was not always this way. The symbol of skeleton woman is a remnant of time when much was known about death as spiritual transformer, when Lady Death was welcomed as a close relative, as one's own sister, brother, father, mother, or lover. In feminine imagery, the death woman, death mother, or death maiden always was understood as the carrier of destiny, the maker, the harvest maiden, the mother, the river walker, and the recreator, all of these in cycle. Sometimes the one who is running from the life-death-life nature insists on thinking of love as a boon only. Yet love in its fullest form is a series of deaths and rebirths. We let go of one phase, one aspect of love, and enter another. Passion dies and is brought back. Pain is chased away and surfaces another time. To love means to embrace and at the same time to withstand many, many endings and many, many beginnings, all in the same relationship. The process is complicated by the fact that much of our over-civilized culture has a difficult time tolerating the transformative. But there are better attitudes with which to embrace the life-death-life nature. Throughout the world, though it is called by different names, many see this nature as un baile con la muerte, a dance with death, death as a dancer with life as its dance partner. Way up in the Great Lakes dune country, where people still live who speak in the biblical dialect of thee and hast and thus, there is a story called Deadbolt. As it was told to me by Mrs. Arlen Scheffler, it is a story of a woman who welcomes a traveler named Death to her fire. The old woman is not afraid. She seems to know death as a life giver and as well as a death dealer. She is certain death is the cause of all tears and all laughter. She tells Death he is welcome at her hearth, and she has loved him through all my crops bursting and all my fields falling, through my children borning, my children dying. She tells him she knows him and that he is her friend. Thou hast caused me great weeping and dancing. Death. So call out the rounds now. I do know the steps. To make love, if we are to love. Bailamos con la muerte. We dance with death. There will be flowing, there will be draining. There will be life, there will be live birth and stillbirth, and yet born again, birth of something new. To love is to learn the steps. To make love is to dance the dance. Energy, feeling, closeness, solitude, desire, ennui, all rise and fall in relatively close packed cycles. One's desire for nearness and for separations waxes and wanes. The life-death-life nature not only teaches us to dance these, but teaches that the solution for malice is always the opposite. So new action is the cure for boredom. Closeness is the cure for loneliness. Solitude is the cure for feeling cramped. Without the knowledge of this dance, a person is inclined during various still water times to extrovert the need for new and personal action into spending too much money, doing danger, roping reckless, choices, taking a new lover. It is the dummling's or fool's way. It is the way of those who do not know. At first, we all think we can outrun the death aspect of the life-death-life nature. The fact is we cannot. It follows right along behind us, bumpety-bump, thumpety-thump, right into our houses, right into our consciousness. If in no other way, we learn of this darker nature when we concede that the world is not a fair place, that chances are lost, that opportunities come to us unbidden, that the life-death-life cycle prevail whether we wish them to do or not. Yet if we live as we breathe, take in and let go, we cannot go wrong. In this story, there are two transformations, one of the hunter, one of skeleton woman. In modern terms, the hunter's transformation goes something like this. First, he is the unconscious hunter. Hello, it's just me. I'm here fishing and minding my own business. Then, he is the scared and fleeing hunter. What? You want me? Oh, I think I must go now. Now he considers and begins to untangle his feelings and finds a way to relate to her. I feel my soul drawn to you. Why are you? Who are you really? How are you put together? Then he sleeps. I will trust you. I allow myself to expose innocence, and his tear of deep feeling is revealed, and it nourishes her. I have waited a long time for you. His heart is lent to create her wholly. Here, take my heart and bring yourself to life in my life. And so the hunter-fisherman is loved in return. This is a typical transformation of a person learning to love. Skeleton women's transformations take a slightly different trajectory. First, as the life-death-life nature, she is used to having her relationships with humans end right after the initial hooking. It is no wonder she heaps so many blessings on those who will go the distance with her, for she is used to having humans cut bait and dash for land. First, she is thrown away and exiled. Then she is accidentally caught by someone who is afraid of her. She begins to return to life from an inert state. She eats, she drinks from him who has raised her up. She transforms herself by the strength of his heart, by his strength to face her. She is transformed from being a skeleton into a living being. She is loved by him, and he by her. She empowers him as he empowers her. She who is the great wheel of nature, and he, the human being, now live in harmony with one another. We see in the story what the death force requires of love. It requires its tear, its feeling, and its heart. It requires to be made love to. The life-death-life nature requires of lovers that they face this nature straight on, that they neither faint nor faint from her, that their commitment to one another is far more than being together. that their love is based on their combined learning and strength to meet this nature, to love this nature, to dance with this nature together. Skeleton Woman sings up for herself a lush body. This body Skeleton Woman sings up is functional in all ways. It is not the pieces and parts of women flesh idolized by some in some cultures, but rather an entire woman's body, one that can feed babies, make love, dance and sing, give birth and bleed without dying. The singing of flesh onto oneself is another common folk motive. In African, Papuan, Jewish, Hispanic, and Inuit stories, bones are transformed into a person. The Nahuatl Kotlik brings mature humans forth from bones of the dead in the underworld. The Tlingit shaman sings of the clothes of a woman he loves. All over the world in stories, magic results from singing. Singing brings increase. Also, all over the world, various fairies, nymphs and giantesses have breasts so long they can throw them over their shoulders. In Scandinavia, among the Celts, and in the circumpolar regions, stories tell of women who can create their bodies at will. We see from the story that the giving of the body is one of the last in the phases of love. It is as it should be. It is good to master the first stages of meeting with a life, death, life nature, and let the literal body-to-body experiences come after. I caution women, do not engage a lover who wants to go from accidental catching to giving body. Insist on all the phases. Then the last phase will take care of itself. The time of body union will come in its own right time. When the union is begun in the body phase, the process of facing the life-death life nature can still be done later. But it takes much more resolve. It is harder work, for the pleasure ego must be dragged away from its carnal interests so that the foundation work can be done. The little dog in the Manawi story points out just how hard it is to remember what path one is on when one's nerves are being thrummed by delight. So to make love is to merge the breath and the flesh, spirit and the matter. One fits into the other. In this tale there is a mating of the mortal and immortal, and this too is true in a love relationship that will last. There is an immortal soul-to-soul connection that we have little ability to describe, or perhaps even to decide, but that we experience deeply. There is a wonderful tale from India in which a mortal beats a drum so the fairies can dance before the goddess Indra. For this service, the drummer is granted a fairy wife. There is something like this in love relationship too. Something is awarded to the man who will enter into cooperative relationship with the psychic feminine realm, which is mysterious to him. In the end of the story, the fisherman is breath to breath, skin to skin with the life-death life nature. What this means is different for each man. How he experiences this deepening of her relationship with him is also unique. We only know that in order to love we must kiss the hag, and more. We must make love with her. But the tale also tells how to come into cooperative and rich relationship with what one fears. She's just what he must lend his heart to. When the man merges with Skeleton Woman, he becomes close as he can be to her, and this causes him to be close as can be to his female lover. To find his eminent life and love advisor, one only needs to stop running, do some untangling, face the wound and one's own yearning with compassion, give one's entire heart to the process. So in the end, in the fleshing of herself, the Skeleton Woman enacts the entire creation process, but rather than beginning as a baby, in the way Westerners are taught to think about life and death, she begins as bones and fleshes out her life. She teaches the man to make new life. She shows him that the way of hearts is the way of creation. She shows him that creation is a series of births and deaths. She teaches that protectionism creates nothing, selfishness creates nothing, holding on and screaming effects nothing, only letting go, giving heart, and the great drum, the great instrument of the wild nature, only that creates. That is how love relationship is meant to work. Each partner transforming the other. The strength and power of each is untangled and shared. He gives her heart drum. She gives him knowledge of the most complicated rhythms and emotions imaginable. Who knows what they will hunt together? We only know that they will be nourished to the end of their days.